Welcome to the Open Word, an online ministry of Boone Open Bible Church.
Hey everybody, Pastor Phil here. I'm pleased to introduce my dad as he brings us gospel illustrations with Doug. And now, here's Dad.
Welcome to another session. We're nearing Christmas time now, so we'll be dealing a little bit more along that line. But anyway, let me get some stuff put up here so you know what we're talking about. Our main subject today will be a person, which will be a main topic all this season. And you already got it figured out, don't you? We're going to be talking about Jesus. He's been a major topic for centuries now, hasn't he? So we're going to be talking about Jesus. And I know that there's a lot of people that carry the name Jesus, but his means more than that. It's not just a person's name. It's also who he is. But let's get what we want to talk about today. We'll try to get that message up. This involves all of us. Okay, you got with me so far, I think. The greatest question. The greatest question. That's what we're going to talk about Jesus. And that greatest question is a very simple but very important answer, or question rather. Got to keep inking that paintbrush and it'll go. That's the other question. Who is this? Who is this Jesus? And it just happens, of course we knew a lot about him before this, but when he went into Jerusalem, there's so many people gathered around him. It was such a big hubbub and big exciting adventure going on. People were standing around saying, who is this? Who is this coming in? And there were a number of opinions, and if you read the scriptures, you'll find out they had several of them. And one of the first ones was Son of Man. Some said he's the Son of Man. And others said, no, he's more than that. In fact, Jesus made it known who he was. But let's go with this, what people thought at the time. He's the Son of Man. And they had rationale why they believed that. Because they knew where he came from. They knew his brothers, his sisters, his mom, and all that. And so they said, well, sure, he's just a Son of Man. And they would have said, we know his dad. His dad was Joseph. That makes him the Son of Man. What they didn't realize is that wasn't the real case. That's all they could see and know. So they're using their logic and answering that question, who is this? Saying he's the Son of Man, and he came from the family of Joseph. So they justified it, saying that's pretty clear. We understand and know what that is. And then others said, well, I don't know. He used to come to the synagogue. And when he come to the synagogue, he could just really give us a lot of good information. Even though the Pharisees didn't like it, Jesus could do that. And they could say, well, we know this about him. They called him rabbi. In our language, we would call him a teacher. And he was a great teacher because he could take the Old Testament scriptures that so many were pondering and debating what it could mean. Jesus could clarify what that means because he was the teacher. He knew all these things. And so there's a big argument going on. Who is this man? And they're all explaining it in their own ways that Jesus is the Son of Man. He's just another human being. Just another human being. The son of Joseph and a great teacher. So Jesus is a great teacher. Indeed, he was. He told us so much. And then others came in that they were really excited when they heard about it, and they began to tell others what happened. They knew by what he did, see? And so they said, something that was really important to them. He fed us. He gave us food. In fact, one of the great stories, one of them, there was a couple of big incidences where he did feed them big time. People had gathered out, a big crowd of people had gathered about to listen to Jesus do his teaching. And as they were out there, it got toward evening time, and Jesus said, we need to feed these people before we let them go home. They'll faint along the way. Said, we don't have anything but 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. What good would that do with a crowd like this? Jesus said, just have them sit down. Then he brought the disciples ahead of him with their baskets. He broke the bread and the fish and blessed it. Said, now go feed them. Now I could only imagine there was very little food in any one of 12 baskets. But they went out there and they fed everybody all they could eat. Then they brought back all the leftovers, enough 12 baskets full of leftovers. Jesus could do that. He fed them, and they wanted to follow him because he would feed them. They cared more about that than any other part about Jesus, that he was a great teacher, and he was also did great things like that. And furthermore, even more than that, he performed miracles. And we know about those things, don't we? We read about it in the scriptures that Jesus performed miracles. One of his first miracles was a boy, I don't know how old he was, but he was being taken to the graveyard in his casket. And Jesus stopped him and took the boy and made him back alive again. Son of Man. They know all these things. They know that Jesus performed miracles. People that had been lame all their lives, he could just tell them get up and they would. People that were blind, he could just say your faith has made you whole, and they could see. Deaf ears could hear. So many miracles he worked out. Demons ran from Jesus, believe me. You may not believe in demons, but the Bible makes it clear there is such a thing, and they do a dirty work. But Jesus could just speak to them and they would go for their lives. Well, he just kept on doing many, many miracles. In fact, one of the great miracles was one of his good friends died. And they called for Jesus to come when he was sick. But Jesus just waited. And the man died. Finally, Jesus went to his friend's place. And they were there just astonished at him. And get this now. Jesus says, where have you buried him? Because he said, well, he's been dead 4 days. And Jesus spoke to that tomb where that man was buried, Lazarus. Just spoke to him, come out. And Lazarus came hopping out. So they said, that's pretty powerful. How'd he do that? Well, we know what it is, but these people, they're answering that question. Who is this? And all of these things were proof of who he was. And then they ended up saying, well, it's more than that. It's more than that. He was kind of like some of the men of old that could tell great things. I hope I'm getting this right. He was a prophet. He could tell them all sorts of things. In fact, one of his disciples that he called, they went and got him, brought him over to Jesus, and Jesus said, I knew you, I saw you under the tree. And just things like that. In fact, one of the great miracles that some of you fishermen might find good, the disciples were out fishing, and they caught nothing all night long. And Jesus just said, throw the net on the other side. And they had so many fish, they couldn't drag them in. They had to call for help. That's the kind of miracles that Jesus did. Do you think people were impressed with that? I think so. I think that you and I would be tremendously impressed with the power that Jesus used, and yet they still called him the Son of Man. Even though some said, it has to be from God. Nobody could do these kind of things unless he was. So, there it was. Jesus, they answered that question there. He's the Son of Man. Joseph was his father. He was a great teacher. He fed us when we were hungry. He worked miracles among us. And he was a true prophet. He could tell them things out of the scriptures. All right? Now we're going to take a break now. And if you tune in a couple of weeks, I think probably, you'll get the second half of the story. The rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say.